Good morning, everybody. We will call this meeting to order. Good morning, members of the public, special guests and staff. Great to see all these smiling faces so early. We will start with the land acknowledgement, and I'll ask Councillor DeLeo to do that for us today. Councillor?
Thank you, Your Worship. We begin our meeting by recognizing the First Nations, Métis, and Inuit peoples of Canada as traditional stewards and caretakers of the land. We acknowledge that the town of Wasaga Beach is located within the boundaries of Treaty 18, the traditional lands of the Anishinaabe, Haudenosaunee, Tionantadi, Wendat, and is the home of many First Nations, Métis, and Inuit peoples as part of an intricate nationhood that reaches across Turtle Island. At this time of truth and reconciliation, we welcome the opportunity to work together towards new understandings and new relationships and ask for guidance in all we do.
Thank you, Councillor DeLeo. And before we move on to disclosure of pecuniary interest, just a couple of items. We'll note that Councillor Faye Ego is on vacation, so we hope it's 5 o'clock somewhere, so hopefully she's sitting on the beach sipping a pina colada and enjoying herself. Well deserved. And I think it's important this morning that we take a moment to just to reflect and think about our friends in Turkey and all they're going through with the earthquakes. Over 17,000 lives lost, and it really makes you reflect on how fortunate we are to live in the community and the country that we live in. And yes, we do have earthquakes, but certainly nothing to that magnitude. So our hearts are with them. They're in our thoughts and prayers. And to our Turkish citizens in Wasaga Beach who may have family there, we're thinking about you, and Godspeed. Now move on to item number 2, disclosure of pecuniary interests. I see none at this time, but I do see that Deputy Mayor Snell does have a transparency statement she'd like to make. Deputy Mayor Snell.
Thank you very much, Your Worship. As mentioned, while I don't have a conflict of interest or a pecuniary conflict regarding item 6.1.4, the cyberbullying speaker series, I would like to provide a transparency statement and to also offer some details around the event. As we all know, cyberbullying, sexploitation, and youth suicide has been an ongoing challenge in our society since the internet explosion. With the onset of the pandemic in 2020, this crisis facing families has not only been exacerbated with the increase in screen time and the advancement of predatory tools. To this point, youth admitted to medical support after an attempted suicide tripled over a 4-month period as reported on March 18th, 2021. And in Canada, 24% of deaths among 15 to 24-year-olds are as a result of suicide, and 3 out of 10 youth say that they have been cyberbullied. With that being said, I, much like all of us, share in the concern of our community around the subject matter. This initiative, while tight on timelines as a result of the keynote's availability, has come together in nanosecond time and has been received so powerfully from community partners. It is an incredibly unique and much-needed opportunity for our community. It is important to note for the table and for the residents watching at home that we have confirmed the entire $10,000 budget has been secured in donations from various businesses in our community. There is no ask for funds or donated facilities, simply disbursement of funds and a small amount of staff resources to support the event's execution. I will also disclose that it is my father who is sponsoring our keynote, Carol Todd's flight. He will be paying her directly and will not receive a tax receipt from the town. My boyfriend will also be donating to the event, but will be covering the costs directly with vendors and will not be receiving a receipt from the town. I feel it's important for the benefit of residents watching to explain this event. Our community will be hosting a speaker series that has been unheard of in this province. We will be the host to one of the most sought-after keynotes, Carol Todd. Carol is the mother of Amanda Todd, who in 2012, at the tender age of 15, made international news after her posted suicide video went viral. The video is a heartbreaking and raw reflection of the devastating impact of online exploitation and bullying. Amanda's legacy lives on and made international news in August of last year when, after 10 years of advocacy and relentless pursuit, her assailant was finally brought to trial and sentenced. This initiative has also formed an unprecedented partnership with the Simcoe County District School Board, permitting not only for Ms. Todd to present 6 sessions that will educate our Wasaga Beach students grade 3 to 8 in both Worsley and Birchview, as well as the staff in both respected schools, and also our grade 9 and 10 students at CCI over a 5-day stay in our community. I'm excited to share that the school board will also film 3 of the in-school sessions, as well as our evening panel discussion, in order to then share those digital assets throughout the 5,000 Simcoe County District School Board staff and the near 60,000 families. The evening session to be held at our Rexplex on tentatively Wednesday, March 22nd from 7 to 9 will host an unheard of power panel of regional experts. We have Dr. Meter, who is the director of the Waypoint Center. We have Ms. Todd, of course, and a digital online expert from the OPP. The event and discussion will be moderated by the director of New Path Youth Services, which is our first point of contact in our community. The evening will be an organic and frank discussion around online bullying and its exploitation, as well as suicide, self-harm, awareness, and prevention. I'm so pleased for our community. I'm incredibly grateful for the staff's support and to the many donors that have allowed us to bring this empowering and literally life-saving opportunity to the families of Wasaga Beach. Thank you.
Thank you, Deputy Mayor Snell, and we appreciate that. And again, this is just another example of the town of Wasaga Beach and the great corporations, the great business people, the folks that live here on a full-time basis, our staff here at the town, all collaborating to come together to make a really great thing happen. So thank you, Deputy Mayor Snell, for that. Moving on to item number 3, open forum. Back to disclosure pecuniary interest. If anyone should feel throughout the meeting that they do have a pecuniary interest, please let us know at that time. And I'm moving on to open forum, and I'll refer to our clerk if we have any one wishing to speak. Madam Clerk.
Thank you, Your Worship. I can confirm that there are no registered members of the public to speak today.
Thank you very much, Madam Clerk. And moving on to item number 4, the approval of the agenda. 4.1, resolve that the contents of the agenda for February 9th, 2023 be approved as circulated. Have a mover and a seconder, please. Moved by Councillor DeLeo, seconded by Councillor Timms. All in favor? That motion is carried. Moving on to item number 5, deputations, presentations, petitions, and public meetings. We do have a couple of a presentation and a deputation today. We'll start with item number 5.1. Mr. Mike Lewis, longtime resident of Wasaga Beach, is here to speak to us about ice danger. So Mike, please come forward. Welcome. Good morning. Good to see you.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor, Council. 2 weeks ago, I had the pleasure of pulling somebody out of the Georgian Bay here in Beach Area 2. He didn't know the danger of shelf ice. Unfortunately, he was staying in an illegal Airbnb, and they don't have postings or anything. I know I came up with the idea of maybe our ice shelf warning that the fire department puts out, if we could put that in all the hydro bills, so it goes to everybody, not just the local residents, but the people in the city that don't come up here, that rent out their units. This way they can be posted in their house or in their cottage, and the tenants and the winter users will see them. I do it with some of the Airbnbs that I work with that I've converted over to legal ones. We haven't posted, so all our tenants know that it's a danger. So it's just something I think town could look at before some smart lawyer comes up with the idea after somebody drowns and tries to hit somebody with a wrongful death.
Thank you very much, Mike. It's a great point. I'm going to look to staff if there's any comments. Our fire chief, Chief Williams.
Thank you, Worship, and thank you, Mr. Lewis. Appreciate the presentation and your efforts a few weeks ago. Water safety is a serious issue. Unfortunately, we have lost a few locals and residents over the years to drowning, so this is a serious subject. There are a couple of efforts that the town already makes. We do have the signage down at the beachfront in the winter that explains the dangers of the ice shelves. We also, at this time of year, use social media to try and get the word out. There's probably greater efforts that can be made. I would support wholeheartedly a mail out going out to residents. But as well, I had a conversation this morning with our bylaw coordinator, and I think we have an opportunity to work alongside the accommodation owners. This spring, as we visit each of them, what we plan to do is leave them with a copy of our summer water safety brochure, or several copies of it, so that they can have them in the units for the tourists when they arrive, because there's a lot of people that visit our town that just simply don't know the dangers of Georgian Bay and Nottawasaga River. And I hope that through additional work that we will do, that we can save some lives. Thank you.
Thank you, Chief. Any other questions or, sorry, comments from staff or council? Councillor White.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor, through you. Yes, Mr. Lewis, thanks for bringing this forward, and thank you for pulling somebody from the water. It does illustrate, though, that there are intersections between the way that we house people here with Airbnb, motels, and et cetera, and I believe this is a council priority to try to sort out this situation and perhaps brings some regulation forward, and I hope that that includes some safety warnings about the water and other elements in our community to make this place safe, happy, and fun for everybody. So thank you again, I appreciate it.
Okay, yeah, there is no signs in the provincial parks as it stands right now, because I've walked the whole length of the beach right down to 65th Street, and in the parks, there's nothing, no notice of any dangers.
That's a good note for us to make. Thank you for that. Any other comments from council or questions? Seeing none, Mike, again, longtime resident, born and raised, good to see you. Thank you so much for coming forth, bringing this not only to our attention, which we're already aware of, but refreshing that for us. And I think it's very important to note that although we have the most beautiful town in the world with beautiful waterways, the Nottawasaga River and Georgian Bay, and as beautiful as it is, it will take your life in a split second if you don't treat it with respect. So, again, I thank you. I think it's something that's very important, and we will get to work, and not only in water bills and tax bills, but we can also speak with Wasaga Distribution and see if we can't get it into hydro bills. I think the more often that we're reminding people of this as well, and the more signage, we'll also reach out to the MECP and see if they can't help with more signage within the parks. All about water safety in general, not just the ice shelf. But it's the ice shelf, I think, to your point, Mike, that surprises people the most. They think it's hard and it's safe. And the worst part is, you know, if you're in the summertime and you're offshore and you're having trouble, people can see you. You fall down into an ice crevice, that's it. No one sees you, no one hears you, and we've had some very tragic deaths, including a young boy in this community. So thank you again. We truly appreciate it, Mike.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Okay. Thank you. Bye.
Moving on to, so we do have a resolution that council received, the presentation from Mr. Mike Lewis presenting the danger for information, ice danger, sorry, for information. A mover and a seconder. Moved by Councillor Belanger, seconded by Councillor White. All in favor? Carried unanimously. Moving on to item 5.2 of the agenda, presentations, My Friend's House, Reintroduction to Services and Programs. And we have Alison Fitzgerald here of Our Friend's House to speak with us today about this very, very important part of our community. So good morning and welcome, Alison.
Thank you, Your Worship, Deputy Mayor Snell, Council, for having us today. It's been a long time since we've been at Council presenting, so we're excited to be here. Hopefully I'll do well with the clicking. So I am Alison Fitzgerald. I'm the Executive Director of My Friend's House. I've been with the organization for 30-ish years, and I've seen a lot of changes in our communities around domestic violence and the need, especially in Wasaga Beach. I also have with me our Communications and Events Manager, Jody Petipas, who is a resident of Wasaga Beach and has been doing an amazing job trying to increase our presence in this community. So we are here today to raise awareness, highlight some of our programs, and ask you to help this community know that My Friend's House is more than a shelter, and we will do everything we can to make sure those who need service get it. We are also here to let you know about the increased presence we have in Wasaga Beach and to confirm our commitment to exploring new partnerships and pursue new funding to maintain our presence in Wasaga Beach long term. Historically, our reach in Wasaga Beach community has been supported by Wasaga Beach Corvette Club and the Rotary Club of Wasaga Beach. We designated funding from both of these organizations to help ensure members of this community can access our services in Collingwood. What My Friend's House has recognized is that My Friend's House needs to have a physical presence in this community. At our core is My Friend's House Shelter. We are located in Collingwood. But we do have resources provided. We do have resources to provide transportation no matter where a woman lives and no matter what time of day or night she needs help. We are a 12-bed shelter and we consistently operate at capacity. As an organization, we have started to explore expansion quite seriously, but that is a deputation for another day. It's a longer one. We are a 12-bed shelter, and sorry, I just read that. Our shelter has counselors on duty 24/7. They provide both emotional and practical assistance and are especially trained to respond in crisis situations through our crisis line and in person. Women and children can stay at my friend's house until they are able to find their own home, which can take as little as 2 months to 6 months and longer. As you know, we are experiencing a housing crisis in this area, and that does impact the number of women and children we can serve through our shelter program. Limitations to our shelter program is why it is important that everyone knows that we are more than just a shelter, and I'll just say it's never that tidy at the shelter, ever. In addition to shelter services, we operate 4 major programs. Our VAW therapeutic program works with women as they start their healing journey, and our child and youth programs work to make sure that the kids get the support and interventions they need to recover. Much of the work done is with the family unit and it is magical to see that families start to play and laugh together as they realize that they are going to be okay. As some of our team focuses on the healing, our wellness coordinator makes sure those who need extra support are connected with community health services. When you are mentally unwell, you don't have the capacity to advocate for yourself. Our wellness coordinator makes sure the women we serve get the access to health care that they need. And then our transitional housing and legal advocacy program focuses on the practical supports. They make sure income supports are in place, housing is found, and if necessary, skills are developed to ensure independence. This program also helps women navigate both the criminal and family law system, which is no easy task. The reality is that 1 in 3 women worldwide continue to be abused or sexually assaulted by a partner. Statistically, Wasaga Beach is no different than Collingwood, Meaford, Barrie, Toronto, or any other community in Canada. Domestic violence is prevalent, and there is a significant demand from Wasaga Beach for our services. 25% of our overall client base comes from Wasaga Beach. In this past year, which we haven't completed just yet, 36 individuals have been admitted to the shelter. 46 women received transitional and legal support. 45 women have accessed our therapeutic program, and 492 women have called in crisis. And this is crisis calls, not information and support calls. As we see demand for our services continue to grow in this community, it is important that My Friend's House, wherever possible, increase our reach. Even though we have resources for transportation, there are still many barriers for women and children trying to access services in Collingwood. We are pleased to let you know that we are in the process of negotiating a partnership with South Georgian Bay Community Health Centre, which means we will hopefully have physical presence in Wasaga Beach on a weekly basis. And we are providing newly developed programming through a small project grant. We are working to find alternate funding sources to keep this going. In addition to this, we have established partnerships with other community service providers to guarantee reciprocal wraparound support for women and children. This means that it doesn't matter what door you enter, you are automatically connected to the services that you need. The programs that we are planning are focused on mental health and addiction and emotional help. We know that experiencing domestic violence contributes to mental health and addiction, and this is why we have our therapeutic counselor, wellness coordinator, and youth counselor going to be working in tandem in Wasaga Beach. The physical space will allow us to create group programming to assist women and families who aren't in need of shelter to help them start to recover. Because of the complex issues they face, our team does work collaboratively to ensure the right interventions are accessible. We will be doing this through a weekly drop-in group where the topics discussed are determined by the women and there is no expectation of commitment. We will also be running a 10-week structured group that provides space for women to connect and share experiences. Guided discussions such as impacts of violence, trauma and trauma responses, anxiety and coping strategies, and community resources are covered. We also have an 8-week structured program which will occur after the 10-week program, and this program will focus on skill development and learning strategies to maintain a healthier life. And also we will have a youth program. This will be a drop-in group where we will talk about distress tolerance, social skills, and self-care, hopefully to contribute to the prevention of domestic violence long-term. And so with this brief presentation, I would be happy to answer any questions. Again, it's been a privilege to stand in front of you today.
Thank you very much, Alison. That's an eye-opening, although a brief presentation, very eye-opening, I'm sure, for anyone listening. Questions or comments from Council? Councillor Belanger?
Yes, thank you very much for your presentation, but more importantly, thanks for the services you provide residents of Wasaga Beach and South Georgian Bay. Would you give me a ballpark of, through fundraising and everything, what your annual budget requirement is, just so we have an idea of your overall need?
Absolutely. Our annual budget is, because we're just in budget deliberations right now, our annual budget is $1.3 million, of which we have to raise $700,000 in the Southern Georgian Bay community.
Thank you very much. And again, thank you to your team and I'm sure many volunteers.
Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Belanger. Deputy Mayor Snell.
Thank you, Your Worship. Thank you, Alison. So great to see you again. And I really appreciate you coming forward to do the presentation, as we had a great conversation during the election time. And that was an eye-opening conversation for me. I didn't realize that that our residents occupied 25% of your space in need. I'm very excited to hear about the forthcoming programming that you're going to be providing residents directly in the community. Do you have a timeline on when you're expecting that to start?
We're hoping that we're just obviously in negotiations, but it's very positive. We hope to get that started within the next month or two.
Thank you. Just a quick follow-up. What is the term of your board, and when do new positions or re-elections happen for your board, please?
Our annual general meeting is in June, so we focus on doing new elections. We'll be actually advertising in March to have new board members join in June. The term, we ask that board members commit a minimum of 2 years, but they can remain on our board for a renewal up to 8 years. Thank you.
Thank you, Deputy Mayor Snell. Other questions or comments from Council? Seeing none, again, Alison, thank you very much for your presentation, and I was remiss in welcoming Jody as well, so welcome, Jody. Glad to see you. You did indicate that you will be coming back in the not-too-distant future with another presentation. I look forward to that presentation. We have every opportunity in this council to make a difference with important organizations such as My Friend's House. And again, echoing Deputy Mayor Snell's comments, that I too was shocked to hear that 25% of the folks who use your services are from Wasaga Beach. So I'm looking forward to that deputation and presentation, and I'm quite confident that Council is going to do everything we can to help you out at that time. So thank you for all you do, both of you ladies and your councillors, and have yourself a great day.
Thank you, Your Worship. Thank you, Council.
All right, we're now moving on. We do have a motion that Council received the presentation from Alison Fitzgerald pertaining to My Friend's House for information. Questions or comments? Mover or seconder, please. Moved by Councillor Tim, seconded by Deputy Mayor Snell. All in favor? Carried unanimously. Moving on to item 5.3, presentations. We are now going to look at our 2023 operating and capital budget, draft 2. And I will turn the floor over to our wonderful treasurer. Good morning.
Good morning, and thank you, Your Worship. and good morning to members of council and staff. So we are now moving closer to the last stages of our budget process with the completion of Draft 2, and details of the budget are included as part of the attachments with the staff report. So I'm going to begin today's review by addressing some of the follow-up questions from our last budget discussion on January 19th. Starting with the operating costs for the Twin Pad, Arena, and Library. For 2023, the budget includes costs for the Arena and Library for the last 4 months of the year. That's for the new facility. The cost for running the facilities and programs out of the old 2 buildings is also included in the budget for 8 months. And as well, we have minimal costs to operate those old facilities in the last 4 months of the year as well. And to get a better understanding of the full operating costs of the Arena and Library, I'm going to use the 2024 forecast, as this contains full year's expenses for the expenses and the revenues. So looking at the library first, the operating cost for the year will be $1.4 million, and there is a small amount of revenue. So when we compare to running the old library, the net change results in about $633,000 increase for the new service level. For the Twin Pad Arena in 2024, the costs are $1.8 million, and the revenues are $700,000, and that leaves a required tax support of about $1.1 million. Comparing this net change for the old Wasaga Stars Arena, there is an increase in the net costs of about $700,000 to accommodate the new service level. So together, the total net increase in cost of the new facility is about $1.3 million, which has a tax impact of approximately 4.5%. So the next item that I want to talk about, still with regards to the Arena and Library, is the 2023 budget. And I'd like to put up do I share first? Sorry. There it is. It just wasn't showing before. Okay, so now how do I bring up the other report that I need? There. I need another report up.
Which one do you want to show first?
Do you want to stop the share or no?
Yeah. Let's do this. Minimize that.
Okay, there, and
So
then
we have
right
to
on the far left.
So we have to do this share, which is this one here. So we can only share one at a time. So there's,
So I don't need that one.
that's not the one you want?
No. The one on the far left.
That's
there.
the one you want, the T-Pal one?
Yeah.
Okay, so we're going to share that.
Okay.
Because we're not sharing right now. Why doesn't it show? Oh, maybe it shows them all in one?
There.
Yeah, they're up at the top, see?
Okay.
So just flip through whatever one it is you want first.
Okay, that's good. Thank you. Okay. Thanks for your support. So I'm going to just increase this a little bit bigger so that it can be seen fully. Okay, so what this chart is showing is the total project cost for the Arena Library facility. And you can see the total project column is $59.8 million. And it shows the amount that we have spent in 2019, 2020, 21, and our 22. And then as our budget for 23, it shows in red the $26.8 million. And this is broken out in our budget, in our 23 budget. You can see there's arena costs, and that includes the construction for the building and the furniture and fixtures. And then there's the library budget, which also includes construction cost and furniture and fixtures. And you can see that that totals the 26 million. So the 26 million that's in our 23 budget isn't any additional costs over and above our project budget. It's part of the budget. And when you look at this chart, you can see how, when you add all the years together, we're still at our original project approved budget of 59 million, and we're not expecting to exceed that. And we're on schedule with that project to complete this year. So I just wanted to put that there for everyone to have an understanding that 23 budget numbers are part of our $60 million approved budget that we've had all along. So I'll stop that share for now. Okay, so now some of the other questions that were still brought forward at the last meeting that I want to just provide some more information on. We had a question about the impact of fewer building permits in 23 on the DCs that would be collected. And the impact of the DC revenue in relation to the decreased activity in building permits for 23, it won't directly impact the 23 budget, as the DC funding that we require in 23 is being pulled from our reserve. However, it is a measurement that will eventually impact DC funds available for future years. And when I looked at adjusting our DC forecast to the 150 units that are planned for 23, because I had used an older rate and was conservative in that forecast, there's no change to our forecast. So we're still in line with what we're using as expectations for future revenues. For insurance, there was a question about whether or not the insurance for the new facility was included in the 23 budget. And we do have insurance for the Wasaga Stars Arena at $55,000. That's what it was in 22, and we have $70,000 in the budget for that building for 23. We have an estimate of $40,000 for the new building, so we are expecting that number to change in draft 3, but we are still waiting on the final number from the insurance company as to what will be available or what will be the cost for that facility. So we'll make that adjustment in draft 3. There was also a question about the amount of taxation support for the beachfront in 2023 if the buildings had not been demolished. So for 23 budget, draft 2 has a tax support for that budget, the beachfront budget of $145,000. In 22, some of the buildings were demolished, and the revenues for those buildings were about $51,000. And some of the buildings that were demolished had not been rented since 2017, so we weren't able to recover the property taxes on some of those buildings either. So there will be about a $10,000 savings there. So we have about $41,000 difference that had those buildings not been demolished. So that $145,000 that we have right now that we need tax support for would be $41,000 less if those buildings had not been demolished. There was another question about carryover for the Schoonertown Bridge and the emergency repair, and we have amended the draft 2 budget to the carryover amount of $1.3 million versus in draft 1 we were using $3.4 million. Another question was about the playground and how those playground projects were funded. And for the Zancor Ramblewood Drive playground equipment and the East End Central East equipment, those are 100% funded through development charges, and the total is about $395,000 of development charges are used. For the replacement equipment for Oakview Woods and Recplex, $330,000 are funded through taxation. And the reason no reserve funding was used is we had used quite a bit of reserve funding for other projects within the parks budget. So none of these playground equipments were funded. So they're 100% through taxation. Another question about beautification and wanting to see an increase, perhaps using casino revenues. The town's beautification budget is $217,000. And before increasing the budget, there needs to be a beautification plan which informs the budget decision. So clarity about the beautification plan with regards to whether it's for signage, facade, gateway entrances, property standards, gardens and flower beds. These are all possible components of the beautification plan. And so that will need to be looked at first. And then with regards to the casino policy, it will be coming forward to council shortly for further discussion and approval of how those funds will be used. Another question that we had was, what is the activity currently for the doctor recruitment program? In 2020, we spent $115,000, and followed in 2021, we spent $40,000, again $40,000 in 22. Generally, the agreements that we have provide funding over multiple years, which is what we're seeing flow through in 21 and 22. And in 23, we have a budget of $35,000. So that's the funding that's been spent for the doctor recruitment program. We also had a question about increased staff for gardeners and whether or not there was a plan to increase those staff. And staff will be reviewing the scope of the beautification strategy as it's developed, and the implementation component that will include an operational resource capacity to implement that plan, and any staffing needs that we will need will come from that beautification plan. Another question was, is there any consideration in the budget for hybrid vehicles? We have 2 hybrid vehicles included in the 23 budget. One is for bylaw and one is for engineering. There's also $75,000 in the budget to use along with any leverage funding that we receive for a green fleet strategy. We had a question regarding credit card payments, and a staff report is still pending. It will come forward. I will share with you that for 2022, the TD merchant fees, which includes most of our costs for this building of payments, was $142,000, and an additional $24,000 related to other online costs that we have, because when you pay through online payments, you have to use third-party providers, so there's other additional costs over and above that. So in total, we spent $166,000 in 2022. So that finishes the questions that I'll address from our previous budget meeting, and I'll now move into a bit of discussion on the draft 2 changes from draft 1. So our budget is addressing about 7 major initiatives and cost drivers, and these include maintaining our existing service levels, incorporating decisions from prior years, positioning the town to address new service levels, accommodating the tax rate increase that's associated with the frozen assessment, and adjusting the cost levels to reflect those inflationary pressures, and adjusting the town's staffing levels so we can provide the future programming and services the town needs to move forward. We also are responding to provincial downloading actions that bring new legislative requirements. So looking a little closer at those factors, we have increased volume of work, and that's driven by growth in the town. This creates a requirement for more resources just to maintain the service levels and to continue to provide the services we traditionally have. And several of our staffing requests in this budget are related to this requirement. The frozen assessment rate for 23 is impacting the tax rate, and if the assessment begins to be phased back in 24, this will help to lower our tax rate, and then the property assessment values will offsettingly be increased. And staff will be monitoring this closely as we move into budgets for the 24 fiscal year for that impact. There are significant cost increases in the budget due to inflationary pressures, and the capital costs are impacted in some cases by 28% increases on some of our multi-million-dollar projects, our capital projects. For our insurance expense in draft 1, we estimated a 20% increase. We have now received our policy, and the renewal policy has come in with a 28.7% increase. So we will be increasing our insurance costs further in draft 3. And this increase does not include all of the same coverage that we had in 22. So for example, we had a deductible of $25,000. Our deductible will be going up to $50,000 under the new 23 policy. We also have not included yet a cyber insurance package with that policy. They're still reviewing that package to provide a quote to the town. As well, the AMO is looking at trying to provide something for municipalities with regard to cyber insurance. And one option that we can consider in draft 3 is whether or not for the cyber insurance policy we choose to self-insure and look at what's coming forward in a couple of years from AMO. So that's something we'll discuss when we get to draft 3, depending on the cost of that policy when we receive that information. And I'll just move on further here to our next section. And I'm going to try and bring something up again on the screen, so bear with me, please. Okay, I have a... I don't know why this is so challenging, but this particular thing is. Okay, so what I've got on the screen is Schedule 1 that was attached to the staff report. I'm not going to go through every line, but I am going to highlight a little bit of the items on this particular table. And when you read this chart, it is showing you at the top the amount of taxation that we required under Draft 1. And then it is showing whether or not that taxation is increasing or decreasing. So if we are increasing the amount of taxation that we need, then the number is going to be bracketed. If we're decreasing the amount of taxation that we need, it will not be bracketed. It's just a little bit tricky sometimes reading this schedule, so I thought I would try and describe that. So on the operating side, we started Draft 1 with an operating taxation, you can see there, of $28,587,000. And we finalized Draft 2, requiring $28,621,000. So that's only a small increase of $34,000 when we net all those changes together. The major changes in Draft 2 included we increased the casino revenue projection by $400,000. We added in the COVID grant funding and those expenses for 2023. We increased the OSIP grant funding that was received when we got confirmation about how much we'd be receiving in 2023. But none of these items impact taxation. However, they're on this chart because they are changes that we made from Draft 1 to Draft 2. We increased the interest revenues in Treasury, and that is based on our forecasted results, and this helps reduce the amount of taxation that we're going to require. And several of the departments, we had to revise estimates, or we revised carryover estimates or added carryover that became known. And there were more wage and benefit adjustments done. So although there's just a small netted change of $34,000 on the operating side from Draft 1 to Draft 2. And then I'm going to look at the capital schedule and do the same. So on capital, we started needing tax support of $3.3 million. We made our changes, and we now require $3.2 million, and that is a decrease of $117,000. So when we look at our $117,000 decrease and our $34,000 increase, we have a net change from Draft 1 to Draft 2. We need $82,000 more, $82,000 less in taxation. So a lot of detail there if you want to see those changes in detail, but in summary, that represents what we have made for changes from Draft 1 to Draft 2. So for the tax rate, there's the municipal tax rate for Draft 2 is 8.5%. and that's a slight reduction from the 8.8% that we were at in draft 1. And the blended tax rate is lowered to 5.89%. And lastly, I'll just mention some of the items that are pending for draft 3. There are still the final allocation of the council priorities, so we have not, we've now seen those presented initially. They'll be coming forward again for final approval, and then in draft 3, we will make those final allocations that relate to the placeholder amount for those priorities. There's some adjustments to be made in our building department. Those items were identified at the January 19th meeting, and those will be made. We'll have our final adjustments to the Arena Library operating costs, because draft 2, we still have a few changes to make to align them with the final numbers. And then just a few minor changes that may arise between now and when we finalize draft 3. And Your Worship, thank you. That concludes our summary of draft 1 to draft 2 changes.
Thank you, Madam Treasurer. Questions or comments for our Treasurer, Councillor Belanger?
Thank you, Your Worship. Jocelyn, you certainly don't have to answer this question today. It can be at the next meeting, but you had indicated for ease of our understanding, you looked at the new library and arena net increase of 1.3 million, which was a 4.5% increase to taxation for the year 2024. But for the last 4 months of this year, and you've indicated that insurance will go up, we'll get a portion of that increase for 4 months, but there will still be some cost to maintaining the existing buildings. So at a future meeting, if we could have an understanding of the impact of just the new library and arena for the year 2023, like I don't know if that's 1.5% or 2% or whatever it is, but other than that, I want to thank you for answering many of the questions. One point of clarification, you indicated that some of the pending items are to finalize the council priorities in draft 3, but I believe that there was a $550,000 amount that's in the budget now, just for the public, that so we haven't finalized it, but we did do an allocation in draft 2. Is that correct?
Through Your Worship, the $500,000 placeholder amount is still in the council budget, so it hasn't been allocated out to the appropriate budget that it belongs to, and that's what we will do in draft 3, is that allocation to its appropriate budget.
Through Your Worship, thank you.
Thank you, Councillor. Any other questions or comments from Council? Seeing none, I have a few, Madam Treasurer. I guess I think it's important to point out that a 4.5% tax increase in 2024 is significant, and that staff and council are working hard to do what we can with respect to our new arena library. But again, I think this comes back to when we narrow this down, it really does come back to building a facility without any help from any other level of government. This is what's going to bite us in the butt as we move forward. And you could argue that the operating costs are very different from the building costs, but when you pull it all into the pie, it's all together. It is one large cost, both capital-wise and from an operating standpoint. So that's a tough one that we're going to have to try and get through. Madam Treasurer?
I think I should clarify, I don't think it was clear, the 4.5%. That represents changing from the old to the new. So those additional costs that we will incur, so that 2024, we're now at full operating level, that change is 4.5% that we will have already incurred. So it's not an additional 4.5 in the year 2024. It's the change, though, that has happened to get there.
Correct. So whether it's in place today or in place in 2024, the 4.5 is an increase overall.
Yes, that's
due to us having a new arena library.
Yes.
And that's, I think, what's important, so thank you.
Thank you.
The other thing I'd like to see as we move forward in the next few steps is that we break a few items out for the public to see. And two that come to mind for me right away, and I've talked about this in the past, is as we look at the breakdown of the budget, I would certainly like to see OPP costs broken out from everything else. And I would add to that fire costs as well. And the reason I say that is council really has very little control over what our OPP costs are. Those costs are dictated to us by the Ontario Provincial Police, and we pay it or we don't have service. It's that simple. And although you know, if we move to a contract, we may have a little more leeway as to what those costs are, and council will be looking at that in future, but I think it's important to break that out. And I think the same for fire, although we've got a great fire department, those costs are, many of them set. I mean, we need X amount of firefighters, and we'd argue that we don't have enough already. We need the equipment that they require to be safe in order to help the folks at Wasaga Beach, our visitors, and of course the firefighters themselves. And we also know that when it comes to negotiation, the town's hands are fairly well tied. So I'd like to see those two broken out if we could, so the public can see the percentage of these budgets, numbers and increases due to those. The insurance costs, I'm sure, are going to be considerably higher for the new Arena Library, and I'm looking forward to seeing what that is. The 41K annual costs due to the demoing the buildings. I think it's important to note too that we also have the loss of an attraction there, which was the splash pad, which we have no longer. And then doctor recruitment. I was able to be in a meeting this week with the Collingwood General Marine Hospital as we look at the redevelopment there. And I can tell you, and in speaking to the Dr. Brakel, who is a member of the family health team that is, you know, working towards recruitment of doctors, so on and so forth. In Collingwood, Wasaga Beach, Clearview, this area, we have several doctors that will be retiring between now and the next 2 to 3 years. So doctor recruitment is going to be an absolute priority. Many people would argue we don't have enough doctors now. The numbers that I seen or were privy to and told is that it's not as bad as most people think. There still are some doctors in the area that are taking on patients, but neither here nor there. I can tell you that I hear on a weekly basis minimum from our citizens that they cannot find a doctor. And my personal doctor, for example, will be retiring in the next few months. 1,200 patients that him in his office are working hard to try to reallocate to other doctors because there was not another doctor coming in that he could turn that over to at this point in time. So doctor recruitment is going to be very important, and I think as we look to the casino money that we may want to add to that pool so as that we have significant doctors or dollars to attract more and new doctors for the area. And again, it also, I think, spells out a need to relook at the serious need for a walk-in after-hours clinic in Wasaga Beach again. Interesting, the 166K in credit card fees, and I know that's split between credit card and online, but that's a little more than 0.5%. It's about 0.6% of our tax rate. It's significant. So I look to council that when this comes back and we speak to it, that we really seriously consider how we're going to deal with that and whether or not we should be passing that on, as most communities have, I believe, already, and most will, if not already. So very important to look at. Staffing levels, I think it's important that we touch on that, and that our staffing levels here have been low for some time, and our staff are significantly overtaxed. They are the most important people in our organization. They're what keeps the wheels on the bus running every day. So I look to council to make sure that we give good consideration to anything around that. And then, of course, the inflationary increase of 28%. And I think every family, every individual in North America is facing this. And I think it's just important to point out for the public that we're no different than you are in your household, except these numbers are much bigger for us. 28% increase in insurance. So I'd like to see, if possible, Madam Treasurer, in the next round, when we look at those increase, that 28% or 28.7% on insurance, if we could just have some numbers, just the basic numbers as to what that dollar value is, so that the public has a really good understanding. A lot of folks can look at a percentage and it really doesn't register, but when they see a dollar number, it certainly does. So I'd like to have a dollar attached to that for the increases that we're facing in some of those items moving forward. And other than that, I thank you for the presentation. Excellent as always. And we will move on. I do believe any other comments? I see none. Okay. So we have a resolution that the Joint Committee of the Whole and Council received the 2023 Budget Draft 2 update for information, and further that committee authorized staff to advertise the public meeting scheduled to be held on March 28, 2023, wherein the proposed 2023 operating capital budgets along with the 4-year operating forecast and 10-year capital forecast will be presented. Can I have a mover and a seconder, please? Moved by Councillor DeLeo, seconded by Councillor White. All in favor? Carried unanimously. Yes, go ahead, Madam Clerk.
Thank you, Your Worship. And just for the members of the public that are watching, that meeting will be scheduled for 6 p.m. for the public meeting.
Thank you very much, Madam Clerk. Very important. All right, moving on to item number 6, the consent agenda, Committee of the Whole. And before we get there, I guess I should pass this off to Councillor DeLeo. Councillor?
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. I will now review the Community Services Business Unit of Committee of the Whole. I am aware that the following items have been pulled from the consent agenda for separate consideration and vote: 6.1.3, 6.1.4, and 6.1.5. Would anyone like to make a comment on an item prior to the consent recommendation? No? Okay, moving forward, I will now call Fire Chief Williams to do his report on Fire Department Monthly Report. Fire Chief?
Thank you, and good morning, Chair DeLeo and members of Council. During January, we responded to 146 emergency responses, and this includes 1 structure fire, 3 public hazard emergencies, 7 motor vehicle collisions, 7 public service requests, 11 fire alarms, and 111 medical calls. We also completed 11 fire and life safety inspections and 2 hours of community outreach programming. On January 17th, we received a donation of 240 combination smoke and carbon monoxide alarms from Enbridge Gas and the Fire Marshal's Public Safety Council, and these alarms are now being distributed throughout the community to those in need. Also later in January, our full-time firefighters completed their annual Quality Care Program medical training, and that's with the County of Simcoe Paramedic Services. And this year, the training focused on reviewing medical directives, emergency childbirth, and trauma care. And finally, last Friday proved to be a very difficult day for many individuals in our community, with extreme cold warning and severe whiteouts that caused the closure of many local roads. With the assistance of the facility staff as well as the clerk's department, we were able to very quickly open up an emergency warming location beside the arena, and we're able to assist a total of 14 adults and children to bring them out of the cold and provide them shelter and food while the storm passed. The location was opened on Friday at noon and remained available until Saturday mid-morning. A number of motorists became stranded in this storm, and they were all returned back home by 9:30 p.m. on Friday night. And we had 2 individuals who spent the night at the warming center because they lacked access to suitable shelter. Chair, that concludes my report.
Thank you, Fire Chief Williams. Any questions for the Fire Chief? Okay. Mr. Mayor?
Thank you, Madam Chair. I just wanted to make a comment, if I may, to the Fire Chief. I think it's important for our citizens to know. We had a meeting on Thursday at the Fire Department, and after that meeting we had some of the conversation. It was playing heavily on my mind, and I know everyone else in the room's mind, about the cold weather that was coming and the severe weather that was coming. And so around 6 o'clock I reached out to the CAO and made it clear that this was playing heavily on my mind, and that perhaps we really needed to move things along to get some assistance open for people, the most vulnerable people in our community. I cannot stress enough how proud and impressed I am with our staff. Within minutes, literally, of that conversation with our CAO, he reached out to the fire chief and other members of our staff, and within 40 minutes, a full plan was in place. Our clerk was heavily involved as well, and so was our recreation staff. A full program in place for that, not only that evening and getting the availability or people transferred if need be to a warm place, but then Friday, well open and ready to go and to serve, as you say, 14 people who were in desperate need at that time for shelter. And again, I am so proud of you guys. Great job, great team effort. It's important for the people of Wasaga Beach to know that we have a staff that is second to none. And when we need to call, they are there, and they're there within minutes. I cannot stress it enough. So thank you so very much.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Councillor White?
Thank you. You know, I received some calls. There was a charity event in my industry up at Blue Mountain over that day as well too. A motorist trying to come back home, and I received calls from people that I barely know saying, "Hey, I'm stuck in your town, and where can I stay?" And so I was able to provide some local accommodations, phone numbers for people. So stranded motorists, and of course the town coming together to serve our communities at need. It was very impressive, and I'm very proud of the work that was done by everybody, including our own clerk who went grocery shopping to make sure people had something to eat while they were getting warmed up. So again, I can't thank you enough, Chief. Great work.
Councillor Timms?
Thank you, Chair. Through you and to the fire chief, I think that the plan worked beautifully, but in conversation with you earlier, we need to have something in place so that it doesn't have to be quite so nimble and last minute. And, excuse me, I look forward to staff coming back with some kind of formalized plan so that at moment's notice, we can move into action. Thank you.
Councillor Belanger?
Thank you. Just through your, the chair, to add to the mayor's comments, I came across driving through town an individual that appeared to be homeless and turned out to be, and the fire chief actually came down to meet me in person, and the individual had a bike that was pretty well loaded, and they made arrangements to get a pickup truck and get that individual and all his possessions to a safe place. He had it in his mind that he was going to be able to walk to Collingwood, and I will tell you, the winds and everything down there, he wouldn't have made it. So thank you very much.
Thank you. Any other comments or questions? No? Okay, I will now read the motion. Resolved that the Community Services section of Committee of the Whole hereby receive the February 9th, 2023 consent list of items 6.1, and that all the recommendations contained therein be adopted, excluding agenda items pulled from the motion and voted on separately. Can I get a mover and a seconder, please? Moved by Mayor Smith, seconded by Councillor Timms. All in favor? Passed unanimously. I will now move to the first item pulled, which is item 6.1.3, pulled by Councillor Belanger. I will now pass the chair to Councillor Belanger.
Thank you, Councillor DeLeo. I pulled the library minutes because there was a highlighted section that was related to the Simcoe County Library Service Review, and it was asking whether or not our CAO had received the Integrity Commissioner report, and I believe that was Aaron Burles that was doing this report for the county. So I have spoken to our library CAO, and I'll just turn it over to her.
Through the chair, this report, the Integrity Commissioner report, was in response to changes within the Simcoe County Library Cooperative that were led by the Simcoe County Regional Review. I am preparing a complete report for council to explain some of those changes that took place and some of the actions that happened during that time, just so that you have a clear understanding of changes to library services that are taking place. It was an interesting time for all libraries in Simcoe County to experience some of these changes. And that report, I just need to check because we have had changes with the CAO in the last few months to ensure that they do have a copy of that report.
Through the chair, thank you.
Thank you. I now read the motion that the Community Services section of Committee of the Whole receives the Wasaga Beach Public Library Board minutes of November 21st, 2022 for information. May I have a mover and a seconder? Moved by Deputy Mayor Snell and seconded by Councillor Belanger. All in favor? Passed unanimously. I will now move to the second item pulled, which is item 6.1.4, pulled by Councillor Belanger. But first, I will ask staff member Josh Pallas to speak to this report. Josh? Okay, I will pass the floor now to Councillor Belanger.
Thank you, Chair. Basically, within the Director of Recreation Facilities and Events, there was an indication that they're working on the washroom maintenance program for the peak 2023 season. And I've been pretty adamant over the last 4 years as to how important it is that both our garbage maintenance and our washroom maintenance needs to be pristine. I could have made this just a comment. My understanding is that we are working for an enhanced program. Josh, you don't need to speak to this one, but I believe it's in the works, and I look forward to seeing the improvement in 2023.
Thank you. I will now read the motion that the Community Services section of Coordinated Committee does hereby receive the Recreation, Events and Facilities Monthly Activity Report as information. Can I get a mover and a seconder, please? Moved by Councillor Belanger, seconded by Councillor White. All in favor? Passed unanimously. Okay. I will now move to the final item pulled, which is item 6.1.5, pulled by Councillors Belanger and White. First, we will hear from Councillor Belanger, then we'll pass it on to Councillor White.
Thank you, Chair DeLeo. My questions were answered in our Deputy Mayor's transparency statement, so thank you for that.
Councillor White?
As well, Madam Chair, my answers were found in the Deputy Mayor's declaration. Thank you.
Okay. I will now move the motion that the Community Services section of Committee of the Whole recommends to Council that an unbudgeted expenditure of $10,000 be approved to cover costs associated with the cyberbullying speaker series featuring Carol Todd, and further that staff be approved to implement and coordinate the cyberbullying speaker series as outlined in this report during the week of March 20 to the 24th, 2023. Can I get a mover and a seconder, please? Moved by Councillor White, seconded by Councillor Timms. All in favor? Passed unanimously. This concludes my section. I will now pass the floor over to Councillor Timms with Public Works.
Thank you, Councillor DeLeo. I will now review the Public Works Business Unit of the Committee of the Whole. I am not aware of any items that have been pulled from the consent agenda at this time. Would anyone like to make a comment on a prior item to the consent recommendation? Having seen none, I will now move to the motion. Resolved that the Public Works section of Committee of the Whole hereby receive the February 9th, 2023 consent list items 6.2, and that all of the recommendations contained therein be adopted, excluding agenda items which were not, we had none today, pulled from the agenda separately. May I have a mover and a seconder? Moved by Councillor White, seconded by Deputy Mayor Snell. All in favor? Motion is carried. Thank you. And I will now pass it on to the Development Services section, I think, sorry. Development Services, Chairman Belanger.
Thank you, Councillor Thames. I will review the Development Service section. There was only one item, which was Committee of Adjustment minutes. I'm not aware at this point of any items being pulled, but if anyone would like to make comment, seeing none, I'll call for the motion. Received that the Development Service section of Committee of the Whole hereby received the February 9th, 2023 consent list item 6.3, and that all the recommendations contained therein be adopted, excluding agenda items pulled from the motion, which there was none. Could I have a mover? Councillor White, and a seconder, Deputy Mayor Schnell. All in favor? I will now turn the meeting over to the Chair of General Government, which is Deputy Mayor Schnell.
Thank you, Councillor Belanger. I'll now review the General Government Business Unit of the Committee of the Whole. I'm not aware of any items that have been pulled from the consent agenda at this time. Is anyone wanting to make a comment prior to the consent recommendations? Seeing none. Resolved that the General Government section of the Committee of the Whole hereby received the February 9th, 2023 consent list, item 6.4, and all the recommendations contained therein be adopted, excluding agenda items pulled from the motion and voted on separately. Can I have a mover and a seconder, please? Councillor DeLeo and Councillor Belanger. All those in favor? It passes unanimously. This concludes the General Government Business Unit of the Committee of the Whole, and I'll now pass the chair back to Mayor Smith for the remainder of the meeting. Thank you.
Thank you, Deputy Mayor Snell. We'll now move into item 7, which is rise and move back into council from Committee of the Whole. And at this time, we will take a 30-minute break so the public can be prepared to come back in and hear the rest of the meeting. So we'll take a 30-minute break, reconvene at 11:45. Thank you, Madam Clerk, and we'll now call this meeting back to order under item number 7, which is back into council. A rise and recommendation. Resolved that the Committee of the Whole session rise and move into council session to receive a report on the proceedings of the Committee of the Whole session. Can I have a mover and a seconder, please? Moved by Deputy Mayor Snell, seconded by Councillor White. All in favor? Carried unanimously. Moving on to item number 8, council session. We have nothing. And under 8.1, consideration of adoption of Committee of the Whole recommendations. And who's going to speak to this? Anybody? Madam Clerk, Mr. CAO? Correct. No one needs to speak to that? All right.
Sorry, Your Worship, nothing was pulled or referred, so you're
Okay.
good to go straight to the motion.
Thank you very much. So we have a motion of 8.1 resolved that the recommendations of the Committee of the Whole session for the meeting of February 9th, 2023 be adopted as resolutions of council. Mover and a seconder, please. Councillor DeLeo and Councillor Timms, all in favor. Motion is carried unanimously. Moving on to number 9, a consent list for council. Madam Clerk.
Thank you, Your Worship. At this time, nothing is pulled from consent. You can lead right into the consent recommendation.
Thank you very much. Item 9.1, consent list recommendation. It is resolved that council session of the Joint Committee of the Whole and council hereby receive the February 9th, 2023 consent list, item 9, and that all recommendations contained therein be adopted, excluding agenda items pulled from the motion and voted on separately, which we have none today. Mover and a seconder, please. Moved by Councillor Belanger, second by Councillor DeLeo. All in favor? Motion is carried unanimously. Moving on to item 9.1, adoptions of minutes. We have a resolution resolved that the minutes, sorry, Madam Clerk.
Sorry, Your Worship, those would fall under the consent list there, so we can just go straight into item number 10.
Thank you very much. So council requested staff reports, notices of motion. Anyone wish to speak to this? All right, we see none. We'll move on to item 11, closed session. And we have a resolution resolved that pursuant to the Municipal Act 2001 as amended, the next portion of the February 9th, 2023 Joint Committee of the Whole and Council meeting will move into closed session to consider the following items. 11.1.1, a proposed or pending acquisition or disposition of land by the municipality or local board, section 239-2C, beachfront lease matters. And 11.1.1, a proposed or pending acquisition or disposition of land by a municipality or local board, section 239-2C, verbal update on beachfront development matters. Can I have a mover or a seconder, please? Moved by Councillor Tim, seconded by Deputy Mayor Snell. All in favor? Motion is carried, and we'll move into closed session. We're now moving back into open session. We did go into closed session to discuss two matters, one some beachfront development matters, and the other with respect to beachfront leases. We have had those discussions and given direction to staff. We do have a motion, or a few motions here now to deal with. First motion is 11.2.1, the closed session item 1. Resolve that council confirms the confidential direction given to staff regarding beachfront lease matters. Mover or seconder? Moved by Deputy Mayor Snell, seconded by Councillor Timms. All in favor? Carried unanimously. We have another motion. Resolved that council receives a confidential update from the CAO regarding the beachfront development matters. A mover or a seconder, please. Moved by Councillor White, seconded by Councillor Belanger. All in favor? Carried unanimously. And another final motion that resolved that council receives the following closed session reports as circulated and approves all actions contained herein. Regular meeting of council January 26, 23, closed session minutes, and the special council of February 2nd, 2023, closed session minutes. A mover and a seconder? Moved by Councillor DeLeo, seconded by Councillor White. All in favor? Carried unanimously. Moving on to item number 12, departmental staff reports. 12.1 is the beachfront manager's report dated February 9th of 2023. And we've already had that update in closed session. So we do have a resolution that council approved the 7 new lease renewals for 31 Beach Drive Unit A T-Shirt Time Ontario Inc. operating as Paradise, 31 Beach Drive Unit B Canada XIAO My Fang Incorporated operating as QB Products, and 41 Beach Drive Unit A and B Chow Pizza Express and Gelato Limited, 41 Beach Drive Unit E Canada XIAO My Fang Incorporated operating as Beach Variety, and 41 to 47 Beach Drive Upper Unit Bananas Beach Grill, 47 Beach Drive H1515 084 Ontario Limited operating as Perfect Image, and 57 Beach Drive T-Shirt Time Ontario Inc. operating as Splashed, based on the town's standard lease. It is resolved that the following bylaw, 2023, a bylaw to adopt an... May I have a mover and a seconder, please, on the leases? Moved by Deputy Mayor Snell, seconded by Councillor White. All in favor? Carried unanimously. Moving on to number 13, bylaws. It is resolved that the following bylaws be received to be deemed and have been read a first, second, and third time, passed and numbered as follows. 2023-20, a bylaw to appoint an integrity commissioner for the town of Wasaga Beach, ADR Chambers, Inc., and 2023-21, a bylaw to authorize the execution of lease agreements. Can I have a mover or a seconder, please? Moved by Councillor Belanger, seconded by Councillor DeLeo. All in favor? Carried unanimously. Item 14, a confirmatory bylaw. Resolved that a bylaw to confirm the proceedings of the Council of the Corporation of the Town of Wasaga Beach at its regular meeting held Thursday, February 9th, 2023, be received and to be deemed to have been read a first, second, and third time, passed and numbered number 2023-22. Mover and a seconder, please. Councillor Belanger, Deputy Mayor Snell. All in favor? That motion is carried unanimously, and this meeting is adjourned.